The huge franchise that is Warhammer 40k and the media that is video games don't always get along. Sure, sometimes we get some pretty good games, even some that are awesome and fan favorites, but I don't think we have any games that we can recommend to basically anyone. Games that you can go to your heretical, 40k illiterate, AAA enjoyer friends and tell them this is the shit, play this. But Warhammer 40k Battlesector is still not that game, but hey, writing a good introduction for a video is a skill I only acquire every Solstice of Heroes, and this year's Solstice is already over. This game might not be amazing or incredible, but it is a pretty good 40k game, and as you know, we don't get many of those. As a 40k fan and also a gamer, I thought I'd make a video preaching the good word of our savior, the master of mankind. Also, as an adult with very little time and money, I feel better about spending said resources in a game if I can then make a video about it. This being a 40k game, we are obviously dealing with a turn-based tactical strategy experience. It's about getting rid of a particularly resilient pest. Imagine your house was infested by cockroaches and you had to send the exterminators in. However, your house is the moon of a planet, the smallest of the roaches are about the size of Tom Cruise, and the exterminators are a bunch of weirdos. Let's see how this story goes in this game.
In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. People are born, they live, they suffer, and die. Rarely of natural causes.
I will not be spoiling any of it, other than the basic setup and maybe a couple of dialogue moments that don't reveal much of the plot. Battlesector takes place immediately after the events of the novel The Devastation of Baal. You definitely don't have to read the book to understand the story, as a matter of fact it is a pretty average novel, but I do feel like I appreciated the context of the game a lot more thanks to reading it. Also, the game's introduction obviously spoils the crap out of the book, so if you have it on your list, be advised. The most basic thing you need to know is actually in the title. The planet Baal has seen better days. The main character of the game is Sergeant Kalian. He, along with his Blood Angels company of Space Marines, is commanded with clearing the moon of Baal Secundus, also known as Balfora, of any remnants of Tyranid activity. The story moves forwards along with the levels in a similar way to Dawn of War 2. The first few missions in the game are spent recruiting the couple of heroes that will join your force and make up the cast of characters. The story itself is pretty average as far as video game narratives go, but as always with these kinds of projects, it's the lore details that make it a pretty decent 40k story. Most characters in the game are likable and relatable enough, and even the one part of the cast that's very unpleasant is doing so very much in character.
Canonis Martilia is a stoic woman. I have seen her cut down traitors in front of their families, slain heretics as they scrawl unholy scriptures in their cradles. She is not queasy in the face of bloodshed. She knew what we came here for.
Anyone who knows about the lore of the Sisters of Battle knows that they're not known for being nice and likable. The highlight for me was actually the Tech Marine, the only character in the game who knows how to chill.
You know, I tried recreating Galleon Stick once. Spent 200 days in the forge putting together an exact replica. Couldn't get a sliver of effect.
What did you do with it?
Snapped it in half. Shattered my kneecap in the process. Not my finest moment, I'll admit.
Every mission briefing has a monologue by one of the main characters, and I honestly found them pretty compelling. Things like Kalion musing on the Primaris Marines and the future of the Blood Angels, or the Sister Superior commenting on how uncomfortable Gilliman is with anything related to the Ecclesiarchy, are some of the neat touches that fans of the setting will very much appreciate. The voice acting is great and appropriately over the top, as is expected and necessary for the franchise. I have to give special attention to whoever voiced the Death Company Marines, cause they did an amazing job.
My blade for the Lord Emperor! They are numerous, but my fury is greater!
That's mostly all I have to say about this story. It's solid, but not groundbreaking or anything. The campaign lasts 15 to 20 hours and the tale was more than enough to get me going, with the right amount of character moments and plot intrigue. Let's talk about the presentation. Now, right from the get-go, you will notice that this isn't one of those games that's gonna put your computer to the test or anything like that. But it does look pretty good as a whole and very nice and detailed when you pay attention to the individual parts of the presentation. Unit models look very nice both from afar and zoomed in, and along with the animations they do a great job of showing what a unit's purpose is, which should come in handy to those unfamiliar with the factions. You see these guys show up and you might not know what their deal is, but it is pretty safe to assume that you don't want to be close to them. There's also a pretty neat photo mode so that you can play around with camera angles and appreciate everything from up close. It does have a couple of wonky death animations, particularly the Space Marines, but these are few and far between.
This is me. I think it's apparent I need to rethink my life a little bit.
I also really like the effects. Both sound work and VFX are very decent. Corpses and blood decals are permanent in the missions, and it's pretty cool to see the carnage and bloodbath a last stand can produce. A couple of the sound effects can get pretty annoying though. Be ready to hear variations of Tyranid screeches over and over and over again. In 40k, the planet of Baal and its moons are a radioactive wasteland of red sands and ancient ruins. However, the developers have done a pretty decent job in avoiding the visual repetition that would come with such a setting. You will go from radioactive plains, to abandoned villages, industrial areas and many other places. Yes, a lot of the time is spent in desert regions, but there is enough variation in both map setting and design to avoid the campaign being visually stale. The music wasn't outstanding or anything, which is something that I always find pretty disappointing, especially in 40k video games. The franchise has some absolute epic bangers, and whenever the title's soundtrack doesn't really stick with me, it's a bummer. Off the top of my head, I can only really remember the song that plays on the main menu, and that's only because of repetition. Some of the story segments and both the first and final cutscene of the game use some amazing art that I wish I could somehow acquire to use for the thumbnail of the video. And that's all on the looks and presentation. Let's go to the main dish. As far as turn-based tactical games go, Battlesector is quite simple. There's a map divided in squares, there's enemy units, there's your units. Units have movement points and 1 action point. Characters and leaders get 2. Action points allow you to attack or use abilities. Movement points allow you to, well, move. Also, movement abilities use movement points. Your commander unit can also accumulate command points to call in support abilities. What does change the formula a little is momentum. Each unit in the game has a momentum bar that, when fully charged, allows you to get an extra action point or buff an ability for 1 turn. Every faction charges the momentum bar by dealing damage, but there are some slight differences. The Tyranids, for example, use Big Brain momentum and get extra momentum points if they hurt enemies close to a synaptic leader. Blood Angels use Angry momentum and get extra points the more of the enemy's face they get. Finally, the Sisters of Battle use BDSM momentum and get points both for dealing and taking damage. This might sound like a neat little system in theory, but in practice it isn't precisely a game changer. The momentum bar takes a while to fill, and given the combined arms nature of the Space Marines, some units get tons of momentum, while others basically almost never do. I don't think I ever had a single squad of intercessors use any momentum. In contrast, units equipped with flamers get tons of momentum all the time. Combine that with the fact that a reward for a full momentum bar is only an extra action point and a little extra movement, and the result is a bit lackluster. Instead of being a powerful tool that I needed to take into account in my strategy, momentum feels more like a neat little surprise. Every once in a while you'll be like, oh nice, this unit can attack twice now. Cool idea overall, but definitely needs some tweaking. Also, I understand the lore reasons for giving the Blood Angels extra points if they are close to the targets, but since all the fights are against Tyranids, a faction that is known for destroying things in melee quite effectively, you end up doing your best to keep your distance and blast things from afar, which reduces your momentum gains. Battlesector's turns are faction-based and not unit-based. This means that first you move your entire army, then the enemy does the same, and so on. Units can move and even attack at the same time, which gives engagements a pretty good sense of pacing for a turn-based game. The enemy can also do the same. Instead of sitting down and watching every single Tyranid unit get in position, they all do so at once, which also fits the swarm nature of the enemy. This approach to the turn system places a great deal of importance in positioning. One of your units out of formation can cause the entire enemy army to focus them down and destroy them in a single turn. This obviously works both ways. Don't like a certain enemy unit? Well, if it's in range, you can unleash a devastating amount of firepower to try and kill them. Ranged attacks use a basic cover and accuracy system. The further away and obstructed your enemy is, the less damage it will take from you. I'm also pretty sure, but haven't been able to confirm, that there might be a bit of dice roll involved. Either that, or my Sisters of Battle are actually blind and pray for the Emperor to guide their shells. I honestly wouldn't put it past them. Ranged combat has a little jank attached to it. For example, here my tech marine can't shoot this warrior because it's obstructed. Sometimes a shot will play the sound effect of a hit but deal no damage. All of this is especially noticeable when using Overwatch. At first I thought I was simply being unlucky, but now I'm convinced some attacks just bug out and deal no damage. Extreme ranges, both very far and really close, are especially prone to this. Overwatch also has the annoying tendency to trigger through terrain, which basically results in a wasted attack. Melee combat on the other hand is pretty well balanced, which is always one of the more complex parts of a 40k video game. Melee units can attack every unit adjacent to them, but they can also charge an enemy if they have the movement points and unobstructed line of sight to the target. A melee unit that is attacked in melee will do a counterattack with every model that was hit, assuming of course they survived. Ranged units that are caught in melee can't simply just move away from their attacker, instead having to use a retreat maneuver that costs action points. Melee units also have zone control, which basically means they will attack units that move through the squares that surround them. If a unit takes too much melee damage, it will be considered overrun and will retreat a square. Finally, units equipped with pistols can do a counterattack against enemy units charging them, provided they are facing them. Melee attacks are also the best option each faction has when dealing with armored units. You might think your Predator tank is the shit, but try not to let them scratch it because it will not last long. I also really like the variety in the units. I'm not the biggest Tyranid connoisseur, but I have played my fair share of Dawn of War 2, so I expected to kill little Termagants and beware the large warriors and carnifexes. Boy was I in for a surprise. Turns out there are many more different types of Tyranids. For example, Venomthropes. You might think that in a race of creatures that look like variations of these, you wouldn't be able to call a single entity objectively uglier than the rest. You would be incorrect in this assumption. Venomthropes like to get up close and personal and secrete the rare and expensive fragrance known as the hive. I advise not breathing any of it. Gargoyles are not concerned with stupid concepts like gravity and elevation. They will fly all around the map and get around your flanks, up in your face or up your ass. I recommend burning them to death. I actually recommend burning most things to death. Turbigons understand that parties are no fun without friends. Did your friends leave you all alone in the party? Do not despair, just give birth to a fresh new batch of friends. You also have exocrines. Don't worry about the pronunciation, you will be calling them pieces of shit in no time. That is a mighty fine and healthy squad of superhuman soldiers. It would be a shame if they all died to a single enemy attack. Seriously, if you catch a glimpse of one of these, dedicate your entire force to taking them out. You can thank me later. Despite the issues, the flow of combat is still pretty good. The AI is appropriately challenging, not necessarily because it's smart, but because it always has the numbers advantage. It is the Tyranid swarm after all. If you're not careful, missions can quickly escalate to a war of attrition. Losing units is a common occurrence, especially if you allow the enemy to close the gap. Some abilities and weapons also have friendly fire, so good positioning is key. You wouldn't want to accidentally set fire to one of your characters, right?
You know how to do it too!
And it is here that we arrive at what is by far Battlesector's biggest flaw. While the missions themselves can be appropriately challenging and demand careful positioning and tactics to not lose many units, these losses have no overall effect on your campaign. You can do an absolute shit job and get all your units killed, but as long as none of the hero units die, then all your forces will be replenished before the next mission. You have an infinite pool of units to add to your army composition. This not only harms the overall campaign difficulty, making it close to non-existent, but also removes a fair amount of replayability from the game. The army management system also has a strange implementation. You can add whatever combination of units you want in your army, however each unit is worth a certain amount of points. Missions have an army point limit that you can't exceed. You have no idea how many points a certain mission requires, you also have no clue of the type of enemy or terrain you're facing. You just get comfy using a certain strategy and plow through the missions. Units being expendable and easily replaceable obviously means that there is no customization or leveling up of individual squads. Hero units have a tech tree where you use tokens granted each mission to unlock abilities and equipment for your heroes and squads. The game is somewhat replayable since you don't get enough tokens to unlock every branch of the tree. However, by the end of my playthrough I realized I had more than enough tokens to unlock everything that interested me for my personal style play, and I currently don't really feel any urge to replay the campaign other than getting footage for this video. This is a complicated issue because on one hand I wish that we could level up and even maybe customize each squad and vehicle under our command. On the other hand, the game is clearly not balanced for this. with units routinely getting focused down and one-shot by the Tyranids. Back to the exocrine example from before, imagine this squad had been with me since the first mission. I would be pretty upset. It took me about 15 hours to complete the main missions. After that, I fooled around with the skirmish mode, where you can also replay campaign missions with every unit unlocked from the start, or simply go head on against a preset enemy force. I tried to play multiplayer, but there were barely any matches. If this aspect interests you, as always I recommend you try and get a friend to buy it along with you. It seems to have a couple of interesting options, including asynchronous play. Overall, this is a pretty solid 15 to 25 hour game. What Battlesector has in spades is lots of potential. This gameplay, with a few tweaks to the campaign, additional stories and new factions, could very well end up being one of the best 40k games on the market. At the moment though, it suffers from a lack of scope and replayability. I certainly feel like I got my money's worth and will definitely be keeping an eye on future content, since the devs have already confirmed more units and factions are something to look forward to. And that's about it. I'm gonna go ahead and pat myself in the back for making it this far without comparing this game to Mechanicus. Thank you very much for watching, consider liking and subscribing for more game reviews and other stuff. I have to go now. Oh shit, I really do have to go now. No, wait, god damn it!
Take one more step, make my day.